Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. A total of $3 million was lost in Nunavut last year from a single incident of spear phishing back in November of 2024. Spear phishing is an email scam that usually targets a specific person or organization. The scammer impersonates someone the victim knows and asks for money. A research associate with the Canadian Institute for Cybersecurity says an attack of that scale likely means the person knew who they were targeting.
I mean, if I'm trying to get $3 million from a company, I would definitely target the person that signs a check or has access to transaction details.
Nunavut RCMP say they're still investigating the incident and can't release any further details. No one has been charged. The government of Nunavut told CBC it was not the victim of this attack. Scammers are creative and they can be hard to identify. Since 2020, NWT residents have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars to scams. That's according to data provided by the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. It's a public agency that collects information on fraud. The CBC's Luke Carroll has been going through all of those numbers and he joins me now with more. So Luke, what did you find?
Well, first, what I found, Megan, was just how big of a jump it was between 2020 and 2021. It was a nearly 4,000% increase between the 2 years. But what's interesting about it is that there weren't actually more people being scammed. It was just that the scams that were successful in getting a lot of more money off people in a few cases. So in 2020, a total of about $10,000 was scammed from 34 victims, so not very much comparatively. But then in 2021, a total of $381,000 was scammed from just 35 victims, so only one more. But this is actually a misleading number. Only 5 to 10% of people report that they were scammed due to shame and people thinking that the money is just lost forever. So Jeff Horncastle is the Client and Communications Outreach Officer for the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre.
That is one of the main factors, embarrassment. Victims may not want to report unless they're guaranteed restitution, unless they're guaranteed to get their money back.
So Horncastle says the territory could theoretically have lost millions, Megan.
That is pretty wild, Luke, especially the jump in between those 2 years. What were the biggest kinds of scams?
So spear phishing was one of them. It's a targeted scam that involves someone pretending to be a legitimate source to convince a business or an individual to send them money. So they target typically, though, businesses and organizations, not individuals as much, and they pretend to be a supplier or a contractor. So they'll send an invoice alerting the person paying that they need to deposit the money into a different bank account, and then they end up taking that money. So it can lead to large sums being stolen. Now, in terms of details of these scams, we don't have any. Horncastle says they can't speak to specific cases, and the RCMP wouldn't speak with me for the story, although they did confirm that the data was correct, Megan.
Okay, then what are the theories for why there was this big increase, Luke, between 2020 and 2021?
So Horncastle says it could very likely be the pandemic.
A lot of Canadians changed their habits from 2020 to 2021. Whether it's spending more time online, generally you're doing more online banking that contributed to the uptick in identity fraud. Changes in habits was a big one.
So Horncastle says there was also an increase in investment fraud during that time. And he's not alone in noticing an increase of scams post-COVID.
It's really interesting the role that COVID played in so many areas of our life. Have you heard anyone else saying that COVID may have had a role in this?
Yeah, so I spoke with Pat Burnstead in Hay River. She's the president of the NWT Senior Society, and she says that scams targeting seniors in a community have been so bad and that they've gotten harder to decipher since COVID.
I know we used to get a few here and there. Somebody from a foreign country would say, you've lost your uncle and you need to send it, $100 to basically get everything moving. And damn well it's a scam. I mean, it was those stupid kinds of scams. Whereas we all say, our seniors say, those guys had too much to do when they couldn't go to work, so they just sat and hacked us all.
So Burnstead says she is actually being a victim of an online scam, losing her laptop due to one. And she knows numerous other victims in Hay River. She says it's actually been so bad that back in January, she got the RCMP to do a presentation for seniors in Hay River for how to avoid scams.
All right. Thanks for all your reporting on this, Luke.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
A former teacher in Coral Harbour, Nunavut, has been acquitted of an assault charge against her. A one-day trial was held last month. The CBC's Emma Tranter has the details.
Michelle Wolf taught at Saco School for about 7 months before she was charged with assaulting a student in 2023. At her trial in Coral Harbour last month, Wolf said she pulled a student by their sweater to stop them from running around the classroom with another student. She said she was worried for the student's safety. The student's identity is protected by a publication ban because they're underage. At trial, the student testified that Wolf pulled their sweater by the neck and hurt them during the interaction, while Wolf said she pulled the student by the waist and didn't mean to cause any harm. Ultimately, the judge found Wolf didn't do anything wrong and was justified in pulling the student's sweater as a way to stop them. At the time, the Department of Education said it was also investigating. Wolf no longer teaches at the school. Emma Tranter, CBC News, Yellowknife.
A lawsuit that the Lutseelk'e Dene First Nation filed against an Edmonton law firm will move ahead. The Lutseelk'e alleged that the firm, Reynolds, Mirth, Richards and Farmer, helped former CEO Ron Barlas bilk them out of millions of dollars. The firm represented the Lutseelk'e companies when Barlas was CEO. The firm asked a judge to throw out the lawsuit. It says the Lutseelk'e lawyers didn't follow court rules when they filed it. The judge agreed that the statement of claim setting out Lutseelk'e's case wasn't perfect, but he says otherwise it's an accurate summary and the lawsuit should proceed. In an email, Reynolds, Mirth, Richards and Farmer denies any wrongdoing. Aurora College needs to find a new chairperson. The announcement comes at a time of uncertainty for the institution's future. Joseph Handley left his role as chairperson of Aurora College on Wednesday. He says seeing eye to eye with the NWT government was often a challenge. It's one reason why he's stepping down before his term ends.
The government not setting priorities, just kind of trying to do everything for everybody all the time, that never works. And so they've got to set some priorities. And we had to do that as a board without adequate funding.
A few weeks ago, Handley and the college's Board of Governors cut community learning centers. He says they made the move to fund programs the college needs to become a polytechnic institution. Handley says a lack of understanding between himself and the NWT education minister triggered his resignation. The minister says she has no further comment. Healthcare was the big theme of this week's sitting in the Yukon Legislative Assembly. Joseph Ho has been covering the session and he's here to wrap it all up for us. So Joseph, there was a big announcement yesterday about a pharmacare deal between the Yukon and Ottawa. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, yesterday afternoon, the federal and Yukon governments announced that they have reached a deal on pharmacare. So last October, the Federal Pharmacare Act became law. The program would start with federal coverage of contraceptives and diabetes treatment. So in the Yukon, that includes $9.5 million over 4 years. That would provide universal access to those medications. Yukoners who need them will receive coverage by next January. Something that will sound familiar to observers of Yukon politics, pharmacare was a demand by the federal NDP in its confidence and supply agreement with the federal Liberal government. So far, in addition to the Yukon, 3 provinces have reached a pharmacare agreement with the feds. Those provinces are Manitoba, British Columbia, and Prince Edward Island.
And our eyes have been on the upcoming federal election, but Yukoners are also heading to the polls this year for a territorial election, Joseph. So how do you think this issue of healthcare will play into people's decisions?
Well, healthcare will likely be the biggest ballot box issue going into the election. So this week, the Yukon Party brought forward 2 proposals. The first was to try poaching healthcare workers who might want to leave the United States because of the Trump administration. They say the government needs to start a marketing campaign and to allow U.S.-trained doctors to practice here. The Yukon Party also said the government needs to strike a task force with the doctors here to talk about how to cut red tape in family medicine.
And how did the Liberal government respond?
by saying that they're already working towards those ends. The health minister said they're trying to attract healthcare professionals from all over the world. She pointed to the millions of dollars that the government has spent on recruitment and retention, and she said the government already has a joint committee with the Yukon Medical Association. That is where they discuss reducing the administrative burden that family physicians face. So the opposition is basically saying, we are the leaders on this issue, we are the ones with the ideas, and if they listen to us, you would be better off. And what we're hearing from the government is, we've been on this all along.
Okay, so there's a little bit of a communications battle going back and forth. Who do you think is winning that?
You know, there is a simplicity to the Yukon Party's messaging. It is, doctors have closed their practices, new ones don't want to come here, the system is in bad shape, thousands are waiting for a doctor, and that simplicity can make it very effective.
And what about the Liberals?
Well, they are the incumbents, and they have a lot more work to do to make their case. So first, they have to empathize with Yukoners who are frustrated or anxious. You hear that with phrases like the Yukon government acknowledges significant challenges, or we must recognize the urgency of the situation. But that's not good enough. Then they have to say what they're doing about the problem, so maybe citing record spending on healthcare. Then they have to show results. It could be nursing vacancies that are down. So empathy, action, results, hitting all three is a lot more difficult than pointing out problems. Your message is going to be more nuanced, more complicated, and potentially harder to understand. Perhaps there is one way that they could flip the script here, and that is force the other side to play defense.
Certainly a lot going on in those kinds of conversations and that messaging, Joseph. How, though, does the NDP fit into all of the debate that happened this week?
They've also been in the mix. Yesterday, they asked about why we haven't seen a pharmacare agreement up until yesterday. They also pressed the government for an update on the substance use health emergency. They also probed the government on how the Yukon is following Nova Scotia's lead on recruiting doctors. The NDP does have a private members bill on its way. Leader Kate White says she has been working on it with the Yukon Medical Association, and she says it's going to result in some big changes for the medical profession. The party is afforded one bill per sitting that will reach a final vote. That was negotiated through the confidence and supply agreements with the governing Liberals. White has said this will be the bill that she wants to get to the finish line, so there is much more to come.
And I'm sure that you will be keeping an eye on it. Thank you so much for all your reporting on this, Joseph.
Thanks, Megan.
That's our legislative reporter, Joseph Ho, who is covering the spring sitting. From territorial to federal politics, the Liberal Party announced its NWT candidate for the upcoming election, and it is Yellowknife Mayor Rebecca Alty. She joined me earlier in studio to talk about the nomination. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, now that the announcement has been made, how are you feeling?
Excited, nervous. I think it's a bit like I grew up playing competitive soccer, and you train, and then it's game day, and you're all excited and nervous. And so, yeah, really looking forward to, it's real, it's happening, and looking forward to chatting with residents across the Northwest Territories over. We'll see Sunday how long the period will be, but definitely over the next couple weeks.
You said, it's real now. How long were those talks about this candidacy? When did they start happening?
I guess last summer they approached me, and I had to think about it. I really enjoy my job as mayor of Yellowknife, and so and it's a big commitment. It's more travel. It's a lot on family. So really had to take some time to think about it and make sure it was the right decision. And so in February I decided, and then it's all the paperwork, the process, and then this morning I got the official news that I'm the candidate. And so now it's off to the races.
Yeah, tell me more about why you decided to make that jump into federal politics. Obviously you were approached, but there was a long time before you agreed. So what was going through your mind and your decision-making process?
Yeah, well, what I love about the municipal is the work. It's the you know, as much as it's the roads, the water, the sewer, it is that community building, and there's a lot of, you get to make decisions quickly. You know, you can think of a bylaw this week, pass it next week, and so at the federal level, I know it can take a little bit more time than 2 weeks to pass something, but I do think it's a really important time. It will be probably a pretty tumultuous upcoming 4 years, and so really wanted to put myself forward, be part of the solution, and not sit back and complain. And it is still dealing with a lot of the issues at the municipal level in a higher way. So stuff like housing, infrastructure, whether it is the roads and highways and electricity, but it is still about the community infrastructure that we all need. Mental health and addictions, again, we see that across the Northwest Territories, and so being able to play that part at the federal level. So yeah, really looking forward to chatting with residents about all these core issues that we face on a day-to-day, and really about all the opportunities. I do want to, you know, I think sometimes we can kind of get sucked into just talking about the doom and gloom, but there's a lot of really good things happening across the Northwest Territories.
I mean, that's a really positive message, and unfortunately, I'm going to bring it back a little bit to the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
Just the Liberal Party, I mean, you made the decision in February. Before that, the polls were not in the party's favor. I think the tides were starting to turn a little bit poll-wise in February. So you'd been approached before all of this, but why choose to go with this party given the kind of back and forth in the polls over the last little while?
Yeah, I think it's really important as a candidate that you take a look at all scenarios. So I have to be comfortable winning, I gotta be comfortable losing, I've gotta be comfortable winning and making government, winning and being opposition. So it was, you know, if you've seen me in council, you know how much I do my homework, and so I did really make sure that I was talking to people. So I was talking to people in the opposition that are have similar styles as me, where like we want to go in and get stuff done. It's not just about, you know, the prestige of being an MP. I don't really see it as the prestige, and so I'm like, I want to make a difference. Can I make a difference if we make it into opposition? I know we can make a difference if it's as the governing party, but really wanted to make sure that it was that I considered all options and that I'd be okay with them all.
And bringing it back even further to 2023, the wildfire evacuations, you became a known face, certainly in the Northwest Territories, arguably across Canada. I know you were doing lots and lots of interviews with media. Do you think that given that situation was quite complicated and very tough for people, do you think that'll help or hinder the campaign?
You'll always have people that appreciate what you did and how you handled it, and people that don't. So I think it's like every scenario. So I've had lots of response from people across the Northwest Territories and Canada, and thanked me for my leadership during that time. And then other people that, you know, had some criticisms, and you take that with a grain of salt. And it is all about learning and moving forward, and we can't live in the past.
And then what happens now with the position of Yellowknife mayor? What is the process that's going to happen?
Yeah, so I'm on leave right now, and I will, regardless of whether it's 36 days or 51-day election campaign, I am going to miss 3 council meetings. So I've asked my council colleagues for permission to miss 3 meetings. If they grant that, then great. If they don't, then I would officially resign. And then if I win, then council would decide whether they've got options. They could appoint one of themselves to be mayor for, you know, basically a year, or they could go to a by-election. And then if I lose, then I go back to being mayor for the next year and a bit. And so, yeah, that's kind of the next steps.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think we've covered it. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Medical travel can be stressful for Northerners, and not just because of flights and accommodations. Being sick far from home can also be scary. This week, an Edmonton nonprofit was touring the North and South Slave regions of the NWT, showing Northerners how it can help. Carla Ulrich has that story.
Melinda Labakan wanted to improve the experience of medical travel for Northerners. That's why she founded Goba Care 4 years ago. Labakan says Goba bridges gaps in the medical travel service to provide assistance, advocacy, and cultural connection. The nonprofit offers free support services during medical trips thanks to funding and donations. Labakan lives in Edmonton, but she is from Fort Good Hope and saw firsthand the need for assistance.
In my own experience with my mom and my sister, I saw the gaps that we fell through here in Edmonton, and just having to navigate an unfamiliar healthcare system, being far from home, and a lack of cultural safe spaces. I started Goba Care to bridge these gaps so that no one has to face their medical journey alone here.
Rita Graham is a Yellowknife resident. She first used Goba Care in 2021 for a day surgery in Edmonton. She says Labakan went over and above to help her.
I was terrified, to tell you the truth, and I got lost in the hospital, and she sat down and just gave me a great big hug and just calmed me right down, and I just felt like I knew her forever.
Graham says Labakan even brought her a big care package that included slippers. Goba Care also helped her with laundry and provided company when she needed it. She says Labakan is the heart of the organization.
From the moment I met Melinda, I had an instant connection with her. I just felt really calm. We would pray together. She would just hold me if I was crying. She's just that kind of a person. She's a very gentle, sweet, lovely lady.
Graham has relied on Goba Care a dozen times since. She says it's more than a service, it's a vital support system. Carla Ulrich, CBC News, Fort Smith.
Nunavut got to hear more about plans to build an Inuit heritage centre at a public information session last night. There were replicas of ancient artifacts and tools used by Inuit at the session, as well as throat singing and drum dancing. The session marked the end of a 3-day gathering. Elders and knowledge holders from South Baffin communities all gathered in Iqaluit to share their thoughts on the centre.
There was many great comments. Elders and Inuit from the communities talked about the importance of our culture, our traditions, and our language, which is eroding really fast today.
Beveridge says that elders want to pass on their knowledge while they're still alive. The creation of the centre means that artifacts and cultural items stored in southern Canada could be brought back to the north. Jimmy Manning from Kingite says the Heritage Centre has been a northern dream.
We're very excited that this Heritage Centre is going to be now in Iqaluit to represent all the Inuit history and all the artifacts that has been gone south. And that will be very valuable for our grandchildren.
The $150 million project is currently in its design phase, and the centre is expected to be completed in 2030. Over 1,000 hockey players are competing in the Yukon Native Hockey Tournament this weekend in Whitehorse. They have traveled from across the north, as well as BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. This is the event's 45th year. It's the largest hockey tournament in the Yukon, but it's not just about hockey. It's also about the gathering of old friends and new ones. Take a look.
Obviously, it's a hockey tournament, so it's a lot about hockey, but I think if they were a First Nations Hockey Association, it's about First Nations culture and identity that goes with that. The whole reason this tournament was created is because a group of guys weren't allowed to play in the current league that they had. A bunch of Indigenous men weren't allowed to play, so they created their own, which was really small at the start, but look at the size of it now and how much it's grown. It's pretty impressive. So I think it's just, it's definitely more about hockey. It's about culture, friendship, and just great celebration. So it just keeps growing and growing. But I think we're at the capacity right now. We don't have any extra ice surfaces, so it just really makes it hard for the tournament to grow.
It's coming together, seeing people that you haven't seen in a long time, since last year maybe, or prior to the pandemic. It's an opportunity for new relationships to be built, new alliances. We always joke about how many babies are born 9 months after the Native Hockey Tournament. Jerry says I'm not supposed to talk right now.
One of the people on the ice this year is former NHL player and Stanley Cup champion Andrew Ference. The tournament's championship games will be played on Sunday. Now let's take a look at the weather. And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a great weekend.
The claims period for 2 classes in the First Nations Child and Family Services and Jordan's Principal Settlement is now open.
First Nations children who were removed from their homes on reserve between April 1st, 1991 and March 31st, 2022, and their caregiving parents and caregiving grandparents can now submit a claim for compensation.
There are free supports to help you fill out your form.
And mental health and wellness supports if you need them.
Learn more and submit your claim at fnchildclaims.ca.
Having 2 kids in diapers impacts every part of our lives. The Canada Child Benefit allows us to give our boys extracurricular activities. It opens their world.
Find out if you qualify at canada.ca/everydollar-counts.
Forced and coerced sterilization of Indigenous people is still happening. The Survivors Circle for Reproductive Justice has supports available for Indigenous survivors. Join the National Registry and access up to $70,000 in healing support funds for individuals, families, and communities. The deadline to apply is March 31st. If you or someone you know has experienced forced and coerced sterilization, please call 1-877-386-0750 or visit reproductivejusticesurvivors.ca for more information.
When you're able to take the next step and invest in yourself and your future, that brings a ton of security.
Definitely something we never thought we'd be able to get if it wasn't for the homebuyers plan.
Find out if you qualify at canada.ca/everydollar-counts.
GST, HST credit, I wasn't expecting a lot back, but when I did check my account randomly and I seen it there, I was like, oh wow, it's a nice little surprise. Just getting that little extra, it means a lot.
Find out if you qualify at canada.ca/everydollar-counts.
One good scheme deserves another.
Stay on him.
I feel we may be in for a challenging few days.
Cheers. Cheers.
Alcoholics Anonymous.
Being there means being here. The city is now very still. To share.
I'm so freaking worried about them.
Adrian Arsenault reports on CBC News. Stream free.
I'm not special. Cancer happens to people all the time. I take 1 mile at a time, 26 miles a day. I want to set an example that'll never be forgotten. Sometimes, it feels endless. But the pain I feel is nothing. I've seen little kids in so much pain. Somewhere, the hurting must stop.
Terry Fox ran more than halfway across Canada to raise money for cancer research. Every year, millions of people around the world continue the marathon of hope in his name.